By 1916, the Western Front had turned into something no military commander had planned for, and nobody knew how to end. 400 miles of trenches, from the English Channel to the Swiss border. Two armies buried in the ground, facing each other across a strip of churned mud called no man's land, protected by concrete, timber, barbed wire, and machine guns. The machine gun had made traditional infantry charges suicidal. You could send 10,000 men across open ground and lose them all in minutes. The artillery bombardments that were supposed to destroy the German positions before an attack often just churned the mud deeper and left the machine guns intact. The first day of the Battle of the Somme, July 1st, 1916, 10 weeks before Flers Courcelette, the British Army suffered 57,470 casualties in a single day. The largest single-day loss in British military history. Men walked into machine gun fire because there was simply no other option anyone had found. Someone had to find a different answer. The tank didn't come from the army, it came from the Navy. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, was one of the first senior officials to seriously fund the idea of an armoured, self-propelled vehicle that could cross trenches and absorb machine gun fire. The project was kept deliberately secret, officially called the Landships Committee. The prototypes were built in Lincoln by a company that normally made agricultural machinery. The engineers were inventing something that had never existed, with no blueprints to follow. What they produced was extraordinary and deeply strange. 28 tons of steel, 26 feet long, moving on continuous tracks that wrapped around the entire body in a rhombus shape. Specifically designed to cross wide trenches. Maximum speed, 3.7 miles per hour. Crew of 8 men, working in temperatures regularly above 50 degrees Celsius from the engine heat, breathing exhaust fumes, unable to communicate over the roar except by shouting directly into each other's ears. To maintain secrecy, the vehicles were shipped to France in crates labelled water tanks for Mesopotamia. The name stuck, they became tanks. Field Marshal Haig had 49 available. 17 broke down before the battle even started. On September the 15th, 32 made it to their starting positions. He chose to use them immediately rather than wait to accumulate hundreds, a decision that remains controversial. Some argued the element of surprise should have been saved for a massive assault. Haig needed results on the Somme now. At 6:20 a.m., the tanks rolled forward into no man's land. The German soldiers in the forward trenches had no intelligence about what was coming. There had been strange sounds at night during British preparations, shapes glimpsed through fog. Nothing that prepared them for what emerged from the mist that morning. The Mark I tank looked like nothing that existed in 1916. To men who had never seen an armoured vehicle, it looked like a creature, moving on its own, absorbing rifle fire without slowing, crushing the barbed wire that had stopped every previous attack, driving directly into machine gun positions and rolling over them. German machine gunners who had held their positions against wave after wave of British infantry for 2 years found their weapons useless. Bullets hit the armour and ricocheted. The tank kept coming. Some positions held. Soldiers who kept their nerve and concentrated fire on the vision slits could sometimes disable one, but many didn't keep their nerve. The psychological impact of something that couldn't be stopped by any weapon you were carrying was devastating in a way that casualty numbers alone don't capture. One tank, D-17, nicknamed Dinneken, drove directly down the main street of the village of Flers, while British infantry followed behind it. A British observation aircraft circling overhead radioed back what became one of the most famous messages of the entire war. A tank is walking up the high street of Flers, with the British army cheering behind it. The village fell. By the end of the day, British forces had advanced further in a single push than they had managed in weeks of fighting on the Somme, at a fraction of the usual casualty rate. The Germans wasted no time, captured documents and prisoner interrogations, gave them a clear picture of what the British had built. Their tactical response was immediate. Distribute artillery to frontline positions to fire directly at tanks, focus fire on vision slits, dig anti-tank ditches. Then they built their own. The German A-75 was enormous, 30 feet long, a crew of 18, heavily armoured. It was also even more mechanically unreliable than the British Mark I. Only 20 were ever completed. But those 20 were enough for one specific moment. April 24th, 1918. Near the town of Villers-Bretonneux in France. 3 German A-7 Fiery tanks came around a rise and found themselves face to face with 3 British Mark. 4 tanks moving in the opposite direction. The first tank versus tank battle in history lasted minutes. 2 British tanks, armed only with machine guns, were quickly disabled. The third, commanded by Lieutenant Frank Mitchell, had cannons. Mitchell manoeuvred, closed the distance, and knocked out the lead German tank. The other 2 withdrew. It was a skirmish. But it was the moment the logic of warfare changed permanently. Not just machines fighting men, but machines fighting machines. The tank in 1916 was slow, unreliable, and limited. It didn't win the war on its own. What it did was prove that the stalemate of trench warfare could be broken and give one generation of military thinkers a concept to develop. A young German officer who studied the tank carefully after the war, Heinz Guderian, understood what it could become with speed, armour, and radio communication combined into coordinated mass formations. In 1939 and 1940, that theory became blitzkrieg. German armoured divisions rolled through Poland and France at speeds that made the mud of the Somme look like a different century. Every tank in existence today traces its lineage back to a 28-ton steel rhombus crawling at 3 miles per hour through the village of Flers on a September morning in 1916. The German soldier who looked up from his trench and saw something moving through the fog, something he had no word for, was looking at the next 100 years of warfare. He just didn't know it yet.